Hi, and welcome back to this introduction to dApp development. In the previous episode, we integrated the Beacon SDK into our app, which allowed our dApp to get the address of the user and also to obtain a signed message from the user. In this lesson, we're going to discuss indexers, and we're going to use an indexer to fetch and display blockchain data about the user. So, in this episode, we're going to learn firstly what is an indexer, and then we're going to look at tzkt, which is an indexer on the Tezos blockchain, and we're going to have a look at its API. And then we're going to play around with some specific API endpoints on tzkt, including one to fetch the balance for a Tezos account and also the tokens for a Tezos account. And then we're going to integrate those two API calls into our dApp in Visual Studio Code. So in this episode today, we're first of all going to learn what is an indexer, and then we're going to have a look at tzkt, which is an open source indexer on Tezos, and we're going to have a look at its API. Specifically, we're going to fetch the balance for a Tezos account and also see the tokens for a Tezos account. And then finally, we're going to integrate those two API endpoints into our dApp in Visual Studio Code. Okay, so here we are again at the architectural diagram that we introduced in episode 2. So as you can see in the bottom right, the indexer is down here. So let's review exactly what indexers are. So as we discussed in episode 2, blockchain nodes or RPC nodes, which are kind of shown here and here and here, contain a copy of the data of the blockchain, so that you can read data directly from a blockchain node. However, the problem is that this data is not in an easily readable form. You can read it, but it's very slow and inefficient, and you can't do any of the kind of flexible queries that you would expect from a normal app's backend. And that's where indexers come into play. So indexers will read the data represented here as the blockchain itself. It will read the blocks in the blockchain and it will transform them into tables in a SQL, usually database, and then provide an API layer on top of that so that you can read the data easily using kind of flexible, efficient queries. So this slide provides a couple of bullet points that summarize what we were just saying, and it also introduces 3 different indexers that index the Tezos blockchain. One of them is tzkt, one of them is dipdupe, and one of them is tzstats. But there's various others as well. But in this episode, we're going to focus on tzkt. Now, I just want to make one point here that tzkt is a piece of open source software that anyone can download and run, and running that software, it will be an indexer that indexes the Tezos blockchain, and it will provide an API that you can then query to query data about the Tezos blockchain. But also, the creators of tzkt run an instance of this software and make it publicly available. So most of the time when I talk about tzkt, I'll be talking about this public indexer, this publicly available indexer. But also remember that you could actually run this software yourself, either locally or in the cloud or something like that, if you wanted your own version of tzkt. So here we can see that there's a link to the tzkt API. So we're going to switch over to that now. And here we are in the tzkt API. So here we are at api.tzkt.io. Okay, so as with most sort of normal API documentation, you can navigate it on the left-hand side. And the first endpoint that we're going to look for is we just want to find the balance of a specific account. So if we click on accounts here, get account by address. This endpoint, very simply, if you provide a Tezos account address, it will respond with various data about that Tezos account, and one of those bits of data is the balance in Tez of that account. So let's give that a go now. So I'll first of all just get my account address from Temple. Okay, so here is my address. It's So if I copy that API call here and I replace address with my address, there it is. Then here we have some data about my Tezos account. Now, there isn't very much data there and it doesn't have a balance. And I won't go into the reasons for why that is, but it's basically because I haven't really used this account on Tezos mainnet yet. But on GhostNet, which is where we've been doing our development and where I added some Tez, this account does have some Tez. So if I copy and paste this API call and add GhostNet in here, which will mean that it gets the data for this account on GhostNet as opposed to mainnet, then there's a lot more information. And actually, if I search for balance, you'll see here that I have a load of Tez on this account. Similarly, we can go to the tokens section down here and do something like get token balances. So I'm going to copy that, add GhostNet here again. And actually, if we look at the API, we see that the account needs to be put as a query parameter as opposed to part of the root. So that means that I will need to go something like this. So api.ghostnet.tzkt.io/v1/tokens balances $account equals. And if I hit that, then you'll see there's all sorts of information about all of the tokens that I have for this account. And we can have a look at this in a more structured way later in the episode when we actually integrate this API call into our dApp. Okay, so let's move back over to Visual Studio Code. So here we are again, and it's in the state that we left it last time. So as with the last time, we're going to copy the previous episode, rename this app5, and then this will be our starting off point. So I can get rid of all of this and just open up episode 5 and run npm run dev. And our application is running on localhost port 3000 /app5. Okay, great stuff. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do, as with the last time, is I'm going to change this to episode 5. And all we're going to do in this episode is when the user is connected using their wallet through Kukai, we're going to make sure that we display their balance and also some information about the tokens that they own. Okay, so how are we going to do this? First of all, we need to add a new function, and we're going to call it get data. And actually, before I fill that one in, we're going to need some more React state. And this one is going to be to track the balance. So set balance. This is going to be a number. Okay, so let's go back to get data. Okay, so get data is going to need to do the following. Const. We're going to use the fetch API that's provided by React. So we're going to say const, let's say raw balances response equals, I'm going to have to make this async in that case, await fetch of. Let's go back to this endpoint that we wanted to use. It was this one. So this is the endpoint that we used to get the balance, if you remember. So I'm going to copy this over. But instead of hard coding the address, we are going to get it as such, wallet address. Perfect. And then we need to get the JSON from this raw response. So const balances response equals await raw balances response dot response.json. Perfect. And from this, we should be able to just grab, let's just check the field name. It's simply called balance. So we should be able to say set balance with balances response dot balance. Okay, and where do we want to call this? Well, we need to call it in two places, really. We need to call it when the user connects and also here. And if you remember correctly, this was if you load up the web page and the user had previously connected. So these are the two places where we want to call it. And actually, it's probably easier if instead of using wallet address as state here, we actually pass it in as a parameter. So I'm going to do that here. Address is a string. Sorry about that. So let's try that. So we are going to do get data of permissions.address. And also up here, we're going to do get data of permissions, of beacon active account.address. Just going to zoom in a little bit just in case that's a little bit difficult to see. Hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so finally, we're going to add a new paragraph here. And similarly, if the user is logged in, then we will show their balance. And if they're not logged in, we'll just show NA. So let's see how that looks. So if I open this up, perfect. Look at that. We can see that the user's balance is, well, 5,853,798. Now that might sound like a lot. One thing that you should note here is that this balance is not in dollars or GBP or even in Tez. It's in mu-Tez, which is a very small denomination, 10 to the power of -6 of a Tez. So it's actually not as much as it looks. So you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to display all of the tokens that this account has. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, as I say, is we're going to fetch all of the tokens that this user has. So I'm actually going to check, well, to keep things simple, I will just do a separate call, but we could put them in parallel using a promise to all, but just to keep things simple, I'm just going to call this raw tokens response and we'll just do them synchronously. Okay, so this was the API call that we wanted to use. So I'm going to copy paste that again to here. And again, I'm going to remove the hard-coded wallet address and instead use the wallet address of the user that's currently logged in. And then I'm going to tokens, get the actual JSON from the response, which equals await raw tokens response.json. Okay. And then I also now I'm going to go set tokens. So to do set tokens, I need some React state up here, which I will call tokens, set tokens. And just for ease, let's call this any. Oops. There we go. Okay, so now I can call set tokens down here. Tokens response. Okay, so now at the same, just to recap, at the same time as we're fetching the user's balance, we're also fetching information about what tokens they have. We're updating our React state that's called tokens with this response. So now we just need to display it. So I'm going to create a new div here. And we might need to figure this one out as we go along because We'll see exactly what the styling is saying, but basically, let's see. Tokens is probably going to be an array. So, okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we kind of need to understand the structure of this response. So I'm going to grab this response, and then I'm just going to format this response in a nicely readable way. So I'm just using a plugin that I have in Visual Studio Code that allows me to structure this JSON response a little bit more nicely. So let's have a look. What we really want to do is we want to display maybe the name of all the tokens that we have. And we also want to show the balance of those tokens. So for each token that this wallet has, I'm going to show the balance of that token, i.e. how many of them I have. And I'm also going to show, the name. Here we go. Okay. So to get the name, we need to make sure that the token has metadata, has a metadata field. Not all of them will, so we're going to filter out any that don't have that. But all of them should have a balance. So what that's going to leave us with is something like this: tokens.filter tokens such that t.token.metadata. It's not null. We can just leave it like this. And then we're going to map each of these tokens. Sorry, bit of a typo there. There we go. And for each token, we're going to create a div. There we go. So sorry about that. There we go. And then within this div, we're going to show the balance of that token and the metadata name. We seem to have a error there. Okay, typo here. Whoops, my mistake. Hopefully now this will work. Okay, I apologize for the terrible CSS, but you can see at the bottom here that we have, for all of the tokens that I have in this wallet, the number of tokens that we have, which is the amount, and then X, the name of that token. Okay, I have now just found how to fix CSS, so if I just delete that one there, then they're not right to the bottom of the page. So there we go. Hopefully that is a good explanation of how we can use an indexer to fetch data about an account and display it in our dApp using the tzkt API. So all that's left is for me to say thank you very much, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode, which will be episode 6.